welcome to the Mariah Jean Fit YouTube channel. I'm Coach Mariah. Make sure you like our videos, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos as much as possible so we can reach a broader audience. We appreciate your support and enjoy the video. Hello and welcome to another vlog and podcast by Coach Mariah and the Fit Minds podcast. Today we're going to be discussing fear of failure. Everybody has experienced a fear of failure at some point in their lives where basically you've sabotaged achieving something simply because you're too afraid of failing. You're afraid of making mistakes. And this is all too common when people are starting up with a new fitness journey or changing their nutrition, looking at changing their lifestyle, maybe starting a new job, looking at moving away. There are so many opportunities, and I will call it that, an opportunity to change your life and the way that you operate on a daily basis, but you hesitate. And I see this a lot. I see this with new clients. I see this with people who have been sitting on the fence for a really long time, whether it's about coaching or whether it's simply about making a change in their life. And it's like they delay and they delay and they delay, and they'll use every excuse under the sun as to why they can't start. I know that a lot of this will come from a position of being afraid of failing. And in the beginning, when I've got a lot of clients learning things like tracking their macros or changing the way that they eat or getting to exercise regularly, that they'll often apologize and say things like, I'm really sorry, I don't know how to do this, and this is really hard for me. I'm really new to all of this and I wish I was better at it. In the beginning of any process in your life, including what I'm actually doing right now, public speaking, even speaking our native tongue, like our language, it was hard. When we were children, if you think back to when we were children, I always reference childhood because a lot of the way that we learn and operate now is reliant on what happened to us as children and the way that we learned as children. So, but when we were kids, and you see this with babies as well, like even these days, when we were trying to learn something, we were hungry for learning and we would often embrace making mistakes. How many times have you seen a baby get up to try and walk and fall over and then just try again and try again? Or try and say a word and it doesn't come out right. We spend large chunks of our life literally babbling because we're trying to emulate what's happening in front of us and what we can hear, but we're struggling. So we're making mistakes. Now, just because we've gotten out of that childlike state doesn't mean we stop learning. Even as an adult now, at 29, I still know how much there is to learn about literally every type of topic there could be. And that doesn't scare me. It's actually quite exciting to know that there is an entire world out there of information that you can absorb, but you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to know everything all the time. And you've got to let your ego stop dictating whether or not you try. So I'm going to dive into a couple of the signs that your fear of failure is probably taking over in a lot of situations and circumstances, and how you can tackle that so that eventually you can normalize the idea of failing, making mistakes, and perhaps not looking at it like it's an entire failure when you do make a mistake. Perhaps maybe this is part of the journey towards succeeding. So when we were younger and we were going through that learning process, we were learning how to walk, we were learning how to ride a bike, we were learning how to speak properly, and we made lots of mistakes. We stuffed up all the time. And how much? And hopefully people in your life told you that was okay. It's okay to make a mistake. You're learning. It's okay. With anything new or foreign or literally something that you just haven't taken on before, and it might be a new responsibility, it might be a promotion, it might be that you're looking at changing your training style, you might be trying to challenge yourself a little bit more, get to the gym a little bit more than you have been, increase your performance. You might even be wanting to take on a challenge with your physique. You might, be wanting to change the way that your body shape appears. And you're thinking to yourself, this is just too much. There's so much, and I'm so scared of stuffing up. I'm so scared of making mistakes with my nutrition. I'm so scared of falling off track. I've done this before and I've made mistakes. Yep. But there's also things that you need to remember that you've done before that you haven't made mistakes with and that you've done very well with as well. And even so, you might have made mistakes, but you got closer to the finish line and to succeeding by doing so. Often we can reassure ourselves that we are capable of doing something if we realize that we've done something difficult in the past. So when I'm taking on a new task, it might be that, for example, I'm not fantastic with technology. And I remember when I was trying to do some instructional videos a little while ago, and I was trying to figure out how to put something as simple as a little bit of text on the screen. It took me 2 days to figure out how to make my GoPro work and how to make the technology talk to each other, and I was super frustrated. And I thought to myself, if it's going to take this long in future to do this, I don't want a bar of it. But then I caught myself and I was like, you know what? Everything I've done in life that I was new at, that I was doing for the first time, was difficult at some point in time, right? It was difficult. It had to be. Everything. Some things came more naturally. Some things clicked. Maybe because I'd done something similar before. Some things were much harder. But often you'll find that the more difficult a task and the harder something is for you, the more you practice and the more that you come back to it, you might take some time away, come back, it gets easier. It becomes second nature. Now, if you're hesitating because you're afraid of failing, you're never going to get to the point where things become second nature. You're always going to start and stop and start and stop and start and stop. And so you're always going to go through that teething stage over and over again. And you're going to feel like, this sucks. I'm not good at this yet, because you haven't stuck to it for long enough. You haven't gone through that lengthy teething phase where, and it can take, honestly, weeks and months, specifically with fitness and nutrition, depending on which one you struggle with more, maybe a mindset as well, to make a significant and lasting change. And that's because it takes a lot as a human being to ingrain habits and behaviors and thought patterns and literally learning new tasks, new skills, right? So they become second nature until they do. Now, we are afraid of failure because when we're going through that learning process, it requires our conscious mind, so the very conscious effort to learn and apply ourselves. And we are so used to doing things subconsciously. You brush your teeth, subconscious. You put your shoes on, it's subconscious. You tie your shoelaces, subconscious, right? You're driving, that's actually subconscious after you've learned how to drive. You ever notice that driving is easier eventually? Obviously, for most people. But remember back when you got your license, you were terrified. Absolutely terrified to drive on a road. So obviously, things go from being a very conscious and difficult effort to becoming subconscious. I am not a product of some sort of miracle gifted, super skilled human being that just woke up one day and I was amazing at being a coach. I wasn't amazing at tracking macros. I wasn't amazing at my diet. I wasn't brilliant at my training like that. I've been doing this for 10 years myself, and I've been coaching others for 5. Now, in that process, I had to make lots of mistakes. I remember a time when I would hesitate to do anything that felt new or fresh because I was afraid to make mistakes. I was afraid of failing. I had this fear of failure. And it seems to be more common when you are surrounding yourself with other people who seem to be afraid of failure as well. I would do that, but I can't get it right. This type of language is congruent with, I'll never get it right. And that's admitting defeat. It's also practicing a sense of not being patient, Now, everybody says to me, patience isn't something that I'm good at. Well, you've got to get good at it. If you want to be good at anything, you must be patient with the process. You must be patient with yourself. You are a human being. You're not a robot, which means that it's going to take you time to learn some tasks, sometimes more time than others. Some tasks will come more naturally, but it doesn't mean that you should compare yourself to other people and how long it took them. There's going to be things that they struggle with in life. It's because of different interests in the way that our brains work and things that we take interest in, for example, when we're growing up as well. So, some people are more inclined to be more talented with written tasks, or they might be more talented with maths. It's because they actually enjoy and they engage in that. And have you ever realized that the things that you enjoy doing are usually things that you're also very good at because you feel confident in it? So then how would it work to improve in anything if you're constantly pulling yourself away from it because you feel like you're not good at it and therefore you tell yourself you don't like it? So it's these kind of relationships we have in our mind with things that we're not skilled at just yet, and we don't like them because we're not skilled at them. But we can often start to enjoy that thing and that task and that lesson once we get better at it, right? We like anything in life, there was obviously something in your life currently, you could probably name it, that you weren't very good at, that you got better at, and all of a sudden now you really like it, or you at least don't dislike it. It's not something that you've got an aversion to. How many opportunities, just have a think, how many opportunities have you missed in your life because you've hesitated, because you're afraid of failing, you're afraid of making mistakes? As a coach, I normalize mistakes. I tell my clients it's fine to make a mistake. It's a rookie error to tell people that because they stuffed up, that they're a stuff up, right? Your behavior and things that you do doesn't summarize you as a human being. So if you make a mistake, you pick yourself up and you get going again. That is one of the most beneficial things you can do when you make a mistake, because the biggest difference between a mistake and failure is giving up. That's it. When you make a mistake, you learn from it, you reflect, and then you move forward. And then next time you think about how you can do it differently. Failure is making a mistake and then admitting defeat and laying on the ground and going, no, that's it. I don't want anything to do with this. Never touching it again. No, biggest mistake of my life. No, that's it. I can't. I won't. And you refuse. That is failure. It doesn't make you a bad person, but it means that you gave up on yourself. And the only way that anyone in this world has ever succeeded at anything is because they didn't give up on themselves. It's because they kept going. It's because they did make mistakes, 100%, right? And most people will not talk about their mistakes. This is why this comparison game, and I've talked about this in previous vlogs, will never work, okay? Because who you're comparing yourself to, and you're saying, well, that person did it really easily. No, they didn't. They made mistakes. I can guarantee they made some sort of mistake along the way to get there. Or they make mistakes in other areas of their life and they don't talk about it. They're not public about their mistakes. They don't brag about their mistakes because no one wants to talk about the things that they suck at, right? Or that they've sucked at, or that they're learning, or they're getting better at. We need to share more of this. Times when we're human, right? And we make mistakes and we fall down and we get back up again. You must accept your journey, any journey, whether it's fitness and nutrition, whether it's your career, whether it's, even your relationships as well, as a constant up and down roller coaster. It doesn't have to be the highs and lows, but there's going to be waves. There's going to be waves. Of course there's going to be waves. We can't keep glorifying this whole, I'm going to start my life over again from here, and that it's this one massive line upwards. It's just like, all right, now I've got this in my mind, jump right up to the top. That's not how it works. We don't do that. Nobody does that in anything that they set their mind to. Even elite athletes, even marathon runners, even, the highest of all high performing athletes will fuck up. And normalizing that is so important. It is so important to normalize your fuck ups. They're not fuck ups. They're not screw ups. They haven't ruined everything. And honestly, in most cases, especially with fitness and nutrition, unless you've got a set deadline to go by, and even then, you can absolutely change the direction you're going in and learn from your mistakes and improve, and it's not the end of the world. So this exponential fear of failure that's been holding you back, to reverse that around and to flip that around, we want to look at the concept of embracing mistakes, okay? Embrace mistakes. Embrace times where things are difficult. Understand that frustration is a normal part of this process, right? Especially with learning a new skill, like tracking your macros, like planning your own meals, like following a new training plan. If you keep running from it, you're going to stay in your comfort zone. This is where you will stay. And even though it's comfortable, doesn't mean it's right, and doesn't mean it's right for you, and it doesn't mean it's right for your goals or what you're wanting to achieve for yourself. And it certainly doesn't give you a different experience of life. Now, that's not to say that you need to constantly be chasing the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. No, you don't have to do that either. But you certainly don't have to constantly put this pressure on yourself, and you shouldn't be putting this pressure on yourself to be perfect. You will lose a large chunk of your life, your very good life, the happiness that you experience in certain situations and the joy and the accomplishments that you achieve, as small or as great as they are, you will lose large chunks of it being fascinated with being perfect. The sense of perfectionism is part of that fear of failure. Unless I'm perfect, I'm nothing. And it's that all or nothing attitude. Successful people, and I mean successful people who are successful and happy and joyous and thriving, they suck at stuff. And they go, I sucked at that, I'm learning. Because they are able to enjoy where they are right now, even with all of the little bits that are difficult and that they're afraid of, because they embrace it. They actually pull it on board and they go, ugh, this sucks, but I have to do it, and I'm going to do it, and it's okay, and it's going to suck, and it's going to suck for a little bit longer, and I'm just going to keep at it. Stubborn people, and I'm one of them, embrace mistakes. Have you ever noticed a stubborn human being and you think, oh my God, that's the most stubborn person, but God, they're so determined, because they look mistakes right in the eye and they go, I'm gonna work on you, I'm gonna get better at it, and I'm not gonna beat myself up. If you spend more time ruminating on your stuff up than you do on moving forward, reflecting, learning, and celebrating your small wins, you will literally focus on your mistakes. And it's that whole, as I've talked about before, the analogy with the target. You're so focused on your mistake and you're so focused on thinking you're going to fail that you kind of almost are heading for that target, right? It's a focal point. I would liken it to walking on a tightrope. Imagine you're walking on a tightrope and you think, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall. You're speaking this into existence. I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall. Or you're walking on a tightrope and you're thinking to yourself, I could fall, but I'm not going to, and I don't want to. And if I fall, what's the worst thing that can happen? I'm going to land in the safety net. Cool, awesome. If I don't fall, I'll get to the other side. A lot of embracing the fear of failure and mistakes is understanding that there is a best case scenario and there is a worst case scenario. And more often than not, if you're really afraid of failure, you will constantly be imagining this worst case scenario, right? But what if I fail? But what if I stuff up? But what if I don't do it right? Okay, cool. But the worst case scenario is if you do that, you can just try again. And of course, it's going to take time. But the best case scenario, but what if I win? What if I do? What if I get really good at this? What if I actually surpass my own expectations? What if I achieve the best case scenario? And you know what's interesting is that more often than not, it doesn't end up being worst case scenario. We actually end up with somewhere in the middle or best case scenario, because our worst fears, it's human nature to want to protect ourselves, right? But we've turned from doing that from a very instinctive way to literally avoiding anything that's risky because of, years of fear mongering is a big one. We look at the media, for example, it's constantly shoving in our faces what is risky, or, what's going to risk of killing us, etc., etc. And there's not enough encouragement and support of what we're doing right. What are we actually doing right? And celebrating that on a daily basis. So that leads me to my next point. Obviously, on the scale of worst case scenario, best case scenario, maybe try not constantly switching to this worst case scenario mindset. Because if somebody else who has sucked at something before has been capable of bringing themselves to best case scenario, you can too, right? You don't have to be this super skilled, super switched on, talented human being. You are just a human being. That is enough. You have a heartbeat and you have decision-making skills, right? And you've got a roof over your head, I would hope, if you're watching this vlog and video, but you can make choices towards the best case scenario. And worst case scenario really can only happen, honestly, if we feed that, if we make sure it happens, if we self-sabotage, if we go, okay, well, you know what, I'm not capable, I'm so scared of failing that I'm going to fail miserably. I'm just going to bottom out because that's what I expect of myself. And so often that worst case scenario can only really happen if we enable it to. Obviously, there are lots of life circumstances where things are out of our control, right? And maybe in the very rare percentage chance it might end up worst case scenario, sure. But if we constantly bring our thinking to that when it hasn't even happened yet, when we haven't even given ourselves a chance yet, how do we know? How do we actually know if if we don't try, if we don't actually apply ourselves, if we're ever going to achieve maybe like somewhere in the middle or best case scenario? We don't know. So you're never going to know. So you prepare yourself for this worst case scenario. Being prepared for worst case scenario, great. Sure, you're prepared for the worst to happen, but that doesn't really change anything. You're being focused on what's the worst thing that could happen. Again, it's like creating that target in front of you. All you can see is bad. All you can see is what could go wrong. All you can see is your previous failures, in quotation marks. And that then becomes the summary of your life. That becomes basically the only thing that you will allow yourself to see is how terrible you think you are. What if you started to celebrate, my next point, your small wins, okay? This is how I changed my life. This is how I turned my life around. I was a person who was very focused on my failures. I was a person who was very focused on my mistakes. I was a person who was very focused on my flaws and what I didn't have and what I couldn't do and what I didn't think I would be doing in 10 years' time, because all I could think about was the insurmountable pressure to be absolutely everything at once. Okay? I had to focus on my small wins, and that's what I want you to do as well. Focus on your small wins. I'm talking every day in my mind, I celebrate making my bed with myself. I congratulate myself. I celebrate making myself a cup of coffee. I celebrate the idea that I got myself ready. I checked my emails. I celebrate the fact that I got through, changing my programs over, etc., etc. I celebrate the fact that I trained. These are all wins in my book. If I get these done in a day, they're wins. But if I don't get all of them done, it's not a loss. And it's certainly not a failure. Along that journey of success, of starting something and getting to the end, you'll have to start to embrace the mistakes, the losses, and the wins, right? So you're celebrating those small wins daily. And then when you have a little loss, it's all good, it's okay. Small wins coming. All right, here we go again. It's a bumpy ride. It's a bumpy ass ride. It takes such a long time, and you will never, and I mean never, get to a stage in your life where it is perfect, and that is okay, and it's how it's meant to be. You're not meant to be perfect. You shouldn't be chasing perfection. As I said, fascination with perfection will see you very disappointed with your current life. And that's where we have that I'm not good enough, I'll never be good enough attitude and comparison to other people's lives. But we're not comparing, right, our life to their mistakes, are we? Because we don't see them. So that's why that never works. Unless you're following someone around with a GoPro and you see every single moment of their life, you're not going to see their losses, and therefore you cannot compare. And even so, you're different people, different circumstances, you can't compare. So this fear of failure, this fear of mistakes, right? This avoiding taking on new tasks because you're so afraid of stuffing up, will see you never achieve the things that you want to. And it won't be because you stuffed up. It'll be because you didn't try. It will be because you didn't try. You didn't even give it a chance. And those stuff ups are not going to destroy you. I can assure you, most of them are not going to be the end of the journey. You know, there are going to be very rare cases, right? In some very rare circumstances where something is going to be such a big deal that it's, you can't change it. But for most things, your career, your relationships, your fitness journey, your nutrition, you can amend, you can work on it, you can improve. Nothing is permanent, right? Nothing is permanent, including your mistakes, including the things that you struggle with. Nothing is permanent. It's one of my favorite concepts, that everything is constantly changing, and that's a wonderful thing. It's actually something to embrace. The idea that you can change and be someone completely different tomorrow, next week, next year, and that's amazing. It doesn't make who you are now a shit person. It gives you an opportunity to improve in lots of different areas and maybe let go of things that aren't right for you anymore as well. So how many times you've self-sabotaged where you were afraid of doing something and you just end up not doing it at all? It's important to understand the practice of actually tackling this type of thing, right? And it starts like this. Just start. Just start. Stop making excuses for yourself or reasons why you can't or shouldn't. Just start and have some support in that process, whether it's with your nutrition and fitness journey, whatever it is, but have people surrounding you who support you in your choices and what your heart says to do. Just start. Stop giving reasons why I can't because of this and I got this going on and kids are sick and this is happening. No, stop it. Because to stick to that, you're going to have to be able to do it through all of the struggle. You're going to have to be able to continue it. And you know what? Those normal life challenges are going to keep coming up. So just start. Learning is a part of the process, okay? Making mistakes is a part of the process. Improving is a part of the process. Growing is a part of the process. And then we repeat. And that's how we learn and we improve and we grow and we change and we make solid habits. It's actually quite repetitious in that it will include some stuff ups in there. It has to. That's how you tackle your fear of failure, and that's how you actually include your failures and your mistakes in that cycle, whereby that you make the mistake, you learn, you reflect, you improve, you grow, and then you go again and you repeat. Just like you did with riding a bike, just like you did with any other skill that you learned in your life that you're probably very good at right now. And if you say to me, I'm not good at anything, you speak English. You speak a language that is one of the hardest languages in the world, because of the ridiculous, grammatical rules and things that we have, and you speak it. How cool is that? So you were obviously capable of doing something when you were much younger, when your fear of failure wasn't drilled into you, and whereby it wasn't a conditional thing where there was shame put on you for making mistakes. So this is why I don't shame mistakes. I always reflect, come up with a solution moving forward, how we can do things a little bit better. And there's no negative connotations to that. There's nothing nasty. There's no point in being nasty to yourself. And that leads me to my next point. The nasty things you say to yourself internally, would you say that to a close friend or family member? No. Then why are you still saying that to yourself? You wouldn't speak that way to someone you care about to try and get them to learn. Why are you saying that to yourself? So make sure that the same language you would use with someone that you care about is the language that you use internally. Okay, so a final couple of points. Uncertainty is absolutely awful to go through, but honestly, hesitating from what you're wanting to achieve is even worse. Not going and tackling something because you were afraid is worse than being uncertain. Give it a go. Take the risk. Take the dive. Do the thing that scares you. Because being scared is often excitement in disguise. We sometimes confuse being afraid with being excited. And not to say there are going to be some things 100% you'll be afraid of, and that's fine. You know, fear isn't something you shouldn't feel altogether. It's a normal human instinct when we feel like we're threatened. But when you are a little bit anxious about something, or you're a little bit unsure, sometimes that's excitement. Sometimes we need to change the way we think about it as, hold on, I'm excited. I'm not afraid, I'm excited. I'm actually really excited for this. I wanted this. Remember that you originally wanted this. If you didn't and it came from what somebody else wanted for you, then that's a different case. But fear is excitement in disguise. So bite off small chunks. Don't try and do everything all at once. That's one of my biggest tips when it comes to fear of failure. Like, don't try and tackle everything all at once. Try and do small things here and there. Don't chase perfectionism in the beginning. And even in general, like, don't try and be perfect at it. Be as good as you can be at it. But you're not going to be there to start off with. So if you do little bits that are manageable, you will get better at it over time. Do not try and take on too much at once and then overwhelm yourself to the point where you back out of it. Be okay with things not going perfectly to plan all of the time, okay? You've got to be adaptable. Nothing will go to plan all of the time, and if it doesn't, you've got to be ready for that. And don't be ready for it in a sense where you're expecting it, but if something goes wrong or comes up, or you get sick, or the interview didn't go as well as you thought it would, that's okay. Normalize that. Normalize things not going perfectly, because life isn't like that. We watch all these fairy tale movies, we watch these situations where we see things go perfectly all the time, and we don't see the bloopers. We don't see where, you know, I might make a mistake in this video. I've had a red flushed chest for some reason this entire video, and I'm going to keep it in the video because it's a part of me, and it's a part of things probably not going exactly the way I wanted them to, but we have to normalize that. We have to normalize this idea that shit happens. Shit will happen frequently. And it's silly of people to try and cover that up. Oh, pretend like it's not there, you know? Cover up all your flaws on Instagram and make yourself look skinnier and, you know, get rid of the rash or whatever it might be. Stop trying to perfect everything, because perfectionism will actually be a form of fear of failure, right? Whereby you don't accept it unless it's perfect. And that's not okay. That's not normal for you or normal for anybody, because normal is mistakes. It is fucking up. It is, you know, bloopers and all the silly parts of life that don't quite go perfectly. That's actually normal, right? That's normal. That is normal. How many people could say that their week this week has been an absolute shit show, or last week was an absolute shit show, or the week before was an absolute shit show, or today was a shit show? Of course, because that's life. Life is imperfect, and that is the wonderful thing about it. The challenges that come with it are actually pretty freaking cool. The cool part is when we overcome them. So also celebrate your wins with your loved ones, okay? Make sure you celebrate your wins loudly, okay? If you have to put it on social media, go ahead. But people who are close to you, text them, call them, say, hey, I did this cool thing, I overcame it. Oh my God, I've been trying to get this done for so long and I finally did it. Put it in a diary, celebrate it, put it down, say it to yourself, say it out loud. Be verbal and written and communicate your wins and when you are doing well, but also communicate when you're struggling. Don't be afraid to tell people when you're struggling. Laugh about it. Make it light. Make it normal. Make it feel okay for you to make a mistake. Because if you're around people who are not normalizing your mistakes and who are making you feel like shit for making mistakes, put them in the bin. I've said this before. Put people in the bin who shame you or make you feel like you're a lesser person for being a human being. They make mistakes too. They fuck up too. It is absolutely silly of them to put on you this idea that they're perfect. Be stubborn in the pursuit of what you want, what you really want for yourself. Be so stubborn with it that you actually put your foot down with yourself. And when you feel like giving up, literally, metaphorically, slap yourself in the face. Don't actually slap yourself in the face, but get real with yourself and say, you know what? You're not giving up on this. You want this. Be stubborn. Practice being stubborn. Remember why you wanted that thing that you were chasing, even when you suck at it, because you're going to get better at it. You're going to keep going at it. Use that internal dialogue wisely. It's what got you through some of the hardest times of your life. Don't beat yourself up for slip-ups or not knowing exactly how to do something. Okay, that's a massive one. Like, Again, you're learning. This is, and you know what, even if you're not learning, even if you're 10 years from now and you've been, absolutely killing it at the game, and all of a sudden 2 or 3 weeks and you're just off your game completely, also fine. Beating yourself up doesn't achieve anything. Being nasty to yourself doesn't achieve anything. Learn how to self-reflect, being an asshole to yourself, because when in life have you ever been an asshole and said nasty things about yourself and achieved something great from that? Right? You haven't. The only time you've ever achieved something great has come from a position of like, right, I'm going to get this. I'm going to get it. Like that fire inside you, you have it. You've done it before. Getting up for your alarm, whatever it might look like. And it's always come from, you can do this. It's never come from, you're a piece of shit, your life sucks. No, like that's not a productive way to move forward. So when we make mistakes, we want to look at how could we improve? What can we do differently next time? Okay? Reflect. I keep coming back to that idea of reflection. It is such an important part of this process. Reflection is not the same as self-deprecation. I've used this in my check-ins before. Self-reflection is not self-deprecation. Try not to dwell on your losses for too long. Okay, so as I said, you want to embrace them, but try not to get stuck on them for too long. So if you've made a mistake, don't spend 3 days talking about it or just, going crazy and spiraling downwards with it. I've done that. I've spent weeks dwelling on one mistake. You can't change it. When it is done, you cannot change that actual thing being done. You're not a time traveler. You can't go back. You might be able to improve it. You might be able to make up for it. Sure, no worries. There's different circumstances, but you can't change that was done. It's done now. So don't dwell. Stop dwelling. Dwelling and staying in a spot where it's past self-reflection and it's now kind of becoming obsessive. It's not going to help you with your fear of failure, because you're going to be worried the next time that you take that on, because you would have turned something that, could have been moved past into something that is much bigger than what it needs to be. So one of the major points to even helping prevent you from making the same mistakes over and over again, and I think this one is really important for implementation, is planning. Plan ahead. If you're worried about something, plan for it, okay? You're not going to do very well at something that you're already worried about if you don't plan for it. So don't self-sabotage. If you've got an assignment coming up and you think this is really hard, right? And in your mind, you already know it's going to be hard. Get out your planner, get out your whiteboard, proactively choose to do the difficult thing now so that when you've got that task in the future, that you're planning ahead for it. Planning. Planning prevents piss poor performance. Prior planning, it really does. I was a non-planner in anything, and my life was just constantly on the go. And everything was just coming at me. Like meal times are all over the place. There were so many things that I didn't plan, and as a result, I failed, or I made mistakes and I felt like a failure. To avoid that, to actually avoid the mistakes, one of the easiest things to stop yourself from making regular mistakes or the same mistakes over and over again is planning and executing that plan from what you've got in front of you. You know what your day looks like. You can turn up on time if you've got something to reference. Use a whiteboard, use a diary, have a coach to check in with, have an accountability buddy. Hold yourself accountable for the plan that you've made, and more often than not, you will actually prevent yourself from making more mistakes of the same type of mistakes over and over again. So if you have your daily checklist, that's actually a really beneficial way of planning ahead as well. It's something that's on a micro level, which can actually help you prevent you from getting into a situation where you are self-sabotaging and then you're not getting anything done, and then you're so afraid because you haven't got anything done and it ends up being this giant mess. So as I said previously with celebrating the small wins, have that small daily checklist, because if you achieve those small wins daily, you're more likely to achieve more of them. It's actually been proven that when we achieve a task for ourselves and we feel accomplished, we're more likely to achieve more. So we're less likely to make mistakes when we actually contribute towards the things that we wanted to do in the day by giving ourselves something to go by having a plan, by having a guide, and that will save you time, energy, and emotion in the long run. So another point is being mindful and staying focused on the task at hand, okay? So often we make mistakes because we're too tired or we haven't eaten enough, or, this is going into the implementation of preventing mistakes. Make sure that you focus on what you're doing. Remove distractions, right? Remove anything around you. Turn your phone off if you need to, if you're trying to finish an assignment. Put yourself in a position where you're not multitasking. allow yourself to be in the optimum position that you know where you can focus and where you know that you can reduce that pressure on yourself, and that you're probably less likely to make mistakes because you have the safe and happy space to actually apply yourself to what you're trying to do. So my final points, I know I keep saying this, but there's quite a few. Be gentle with yourself. Always be gentle with yourself. Don't keep slamming yourself up against the wall all the time, over and over again, every time you make a mistake. Make a mistake, be gentle with the process. Be gentle with yourself, like you would with a stranger or a new person in your life. Be gentle, because more often than not, we're doing that because we don't want to hurt their feelings. We don't want to harm them. You don't want to harm yourself in this process. Making mistakes, be gentle with yourself. That's one of my biggest pieces of advice. If I ever feel like I'm about to internalize something and go ham on myself, I have to remind myself, oh, that's right. You do better with softness. If you actually do better, and most people will do better with taking a softer approach with themselves. And I don't mean that means easing up, right? Just don't, and I know you've done it. Don't have that, like angry conversation in your mind with yourself that you're an awful person. Be gentle with yourself. You're not an awful person. You're a good person. You just made a mistake. That's it. And just because you're not good at it now doesn't mean you're not going to be good at it in the future. Don't look at now as a snapshot of what it's going to look like in the future. This is one of the most common issues I see, is that people summarize their experience of something as how it is now as to how it will be in the future. No. How it is now will be very different in the future with lots of application and practice. Visualize that, be patient for that process, and understand that it can take weeks, months, years. So finally, self-reassurance goes a long way, and support from others as well. But as I said, it's all this internal dialogue that will do most of the work, okay? This proactive attitude towards what you're wanting to achieve and embracing the idea that it's okay to make mistakes. This will change your experience of pretty much anything you apply yourself to in the future. And again, if you have people around you that don't normalize mistakes, put them in the bin, okay, if you can, or distance yourself from them, and surround yourself with people who seem to make it feel okay to make those mistakes, who support you in your wins and even in your losses. All right, thanks a lot. Looking forward to doing another vlog for you soon. Make sure you like, subscribe, rate our podcast, subscribe to our social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We've got everything. We've got a website as well, mariahjeanfit.com. Check out what we do, and make sure you tune in for the next podcast. Thanks a lot. Bye.